Hello, I'm an old fart, and I have a guilty pleasure. I like knives. I'm not an expert or an official representative of anything or anybody. I just like knives. I collect small folding pocket knives, usually what I call NTGKs, non-threatening gentleman's knives. Today, as we tour through my collection, we're going to look at this knife, which is not quite in line with my usual focus. This is a Spyderco Native 4, not quite in line with my usual focus on non-threatening gentleman's knives. So why this one? Well, it's because I've discovered I have another little niche in my hobby too, which is I like finding bargains, cheap knives that are cheap because they're in bad shape, fixer-uppers, and fixing them up. And this was one of those. I was able to get this quite inexpensive, clearly marked as is, needs work. And it did. Despite the fact that it was in bad shape, this was a kind of a classic in its day. It's a discontinued model, the Native 4. There is a Native 5 out now. This is the carbon fiber version, and it's also on the user groups. It's also often referred to as the Japanese steel version. You can see on the one side, made in Seki City, Japan. So it's a knife with a history and a lot of respect, and it was in bad shape and needed work. And boy, did it need work. The mechanism was very stiff. I could barely get it open. The clip was a disaster. In fact, I have the old clip here. Badly chipped paint, but worse, badly bent. I think it had been caught in something, I guess, and pulled away from the knife body. I've tried to reshape it as best as I could. I still haven't got it exactly right, but it was kind of fastened to the knife. Fastened to the knife. It was kind of sticking out here in a bunch of weird bends, so it was in pretty bad shape. And it was very, very dull. I don't know how I managed it. It was almost as dull as the used Tenacious that I talked about a couple of videos ago. But that one, and most of the really dull knives I've acquired, use cheap steel, budget steel. One of the reasons that it can be so dull is that it's cheap steel that doesn't hold an edge well. But this is VG10. I don't know how a VG10 blade got so dull. I just can't imagine. So anyway, it needed work. So I did a bunch of things to it. I had disassembled it and cleaned it and smoothed out surfaces that had been scraped by or scratched by grit. Lubricated it, so inside there is some nano grease and some nano oil. Reassembled it and worked on adjusting the action. And adjusting the action was not easy. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but strangely, obviously the pivot screw, well, not obviously, like on many knives, the tightness of the pivot screw affects the tightness of the action. But unlike many knives, so does the tightness of the scale screws and even the tightness of the clip screws. And of course, first thing I did was snug those up quite firmly, and then I couldn't get the knife to move. And eventually I realized that all of these screws are part of the tension on the blade. So it was a bit of work to get that right. I sharpened it, brought it up to a pretty good edge. I think you can see there, it's a mirrored edge now, and it's darn sharp. We'll just get out my darn sharp demonstrator. So that's pretty good sharpness for a knife that had basically no edge on it at all. And I gave up trying to fix the clip. I wrote it off. I happen to have this clip lying around and it fits, and so I installed this one. So that's what I did to refurbish it and bring it up to pretty good condition. So let's talk about the knife. Formerly then, this is a Spyderco Native Model 4 carbon fiber version. And it is the one with the VG10 steel. And it is sometimes, for reasons I'm not sure of, called the Japan version. I don't know whether, does that mean that others are not made in Japan? So anyway, it's the Japan version, VG10, Native 4, carbon fiber. Some combination of those words is the correct name for this knife. It is considered, if you look in the forums, slightly rare. The reason I was able to get this one was it was in crappy condition. So don't be afraid to buy knives in crappy condition if you own a screwdriver and some oil. Mechanism, it is the typical Spidey hole opening. So you can pull it open with 2 hands. You can Spidey hole it open with your thumb. This is a lockback knife. Not the typical compression lock that a lot of Spydercos use. So press there to release the lock, and then the blade will close. It opens slowly. You can see me open it slowly and deliberately. It's actually quite a pleasant open. I'll come back to that. Doesn't flick open. I cannot see how you could make it flickable. If I set everything very loose, it is flickable, but everything is very loose and like you can wobble everything around. So I don't see how this would be settable to be flickable. And that doesn't bother me. I like slow opening a knife. I like the slow, deliberate opening feeling. I know I rave about flickability on some knives that have it, and I play with them endlessly, but how can you not? It's a fidget spinner. That's what fidget spinners are for. But for non-threatening nature and basic usefulness, I actually like a slow, deliberate open on a knife. So that a knife that can only do that is fine with me. Let's also talk about the size of this knife. It's a small knife, a compact knife, I guess is a better word. It's 178 millimeters long, which is 0.97 pocket calculators. So a little under 1.0 pocket calculators, my standard international scale. And to compare it to some things, well, if you recall, I showed you a cheap, bad shape fixer-upper Spyderco Tenacious a couple of weeks ago. It looks a lot like the Tenacious, but as you can see with them side by side, considerably smaller than the Tenacious, if a similar design. So what's it the same size as? If I put it next to my standard comparator for mid-size knives, there's a Benchmade Mini Griptilian. It's somewhat larger than a Mini Griptilian. Although interestingly, is that a word? The actual sharpened blade length is less. The difference in the sizes is a slightly longer handle, and also this good ½ inch here of steel in the blade that is not sharpened. So anyway, a little smaller overall than the Mini Griptilian. Looking around for a knife that it's the same size as, it's pretty much the same size as the Monterey Bay EZC. Lining them up there, I guess it's a few millimeters larger, but at least in that class. It's a mid-weight knife as well. It's 88.6 grams, so call it 89 grams. The Mini Griptilian is 79, so about 10 grams lighter. Heavier than that. Heavier than a small Savenza. It is about the same weight as the Lion Steel Thrill slip joint knife, actually, just to give you something. So it's in the size class of mid-size knives, a little on the large end, and the weight class of mid-size knives, a little on the heavy end. The blade on this knife is VG10 steel. The blade is 3.1 inches long. Now that's from the specifications. What I don't know when you're measuring a blade length like this is what's measured. Well, I do know what's measured. I checked it. The 3.1 is the length of the steel, so from here to the end. The sharpened length of the blade is only 2.5 inches. So if you're in an area where the length of the blade matters for legal reasons, you want to get more professional advice than from me, because I don't know whether those jurisdictions are measuring the length of the steel or the length of the sharp. And it has the traditional Spyderco kind of leaf-shaped blade. They call it a spear point. I always think of it as a Spidey leaf. No sharpening choil. Does any Spyderco have a sharpening choil? I don't know. So the shoulder was in danger when I was sharpening the knife. So although there's no sharpening choil, there is a big finger choil here. It's actually huge. Like, it's designed to fit your finger in there for close work, and it is remarkably comfortable. We'll come back to that. And as I already mentioned, a lot of the blade steel isn't sharpened edge, a little unusual. The body is carbon fiber on steel, and it's this type of carbon fiber that I rather like. It's that woven pattern of carbon fiber. I'm just going to put another light on here. The sun is starting to set. There we are. That woven pattern of carbon fiber that I really like. It's very flat and smooth. probably not great for grip, frankly, but I think it's very attractive, and I like the feel of it to hold. The clip, typical Spyderco, it's a 4-way clip, so you can put it on either end and on either side. And like most of the Spydercos I have experienced, I haven't experienced that many, it came with the clip up here, so it was up here, mounted for tip down carry. So I moved it to this side for tip up carry. Not that I have strong feelings about tip up versus tip down. I don't really understand how you would argue one over the other, frankly, but because all my other knives are this way, and I wanted them all to be the same. I will mention the clip is a little bit weird. The clip covers the lanyard hole. Now the stock clip, here's the stock clip. When it's mounted, it's got this extra hole in it so that it covers the lanyard hole, but you can still pass a lanyard through it. If you put a non-stock clip on it, as I did, the lanyard hole is blocked. And so, lanyard hole, yes, if you have the stock clip or no clip. If you use one of the many clips that will fit a Spyderco knife, but that doesn't have that special hole in it, chances are you're going to render the lanyard hole inaccessible. Next thing, is it ambidextrous? Let's say almost perfectly so. Let's say 99%. Spidey hole is completely ambidextrous. You can open it with either hand. I don't know if I can open it with either hand, but one can. No, I can't. One can open it with either hand. With the clip movable to either side, that's not a problem. The lock is in the center of the back, so unlocking it is the same with each hand. So the only reason that I said it's 99% ambidextrous is it does have conspicuous screw heads on one side and domed on the other side. So it has a presentation side. Now you could move those screws to the other side, but given that the screws interact with the blade mechanism, I wouldn't move them unless I really needed to, because it's a pain to get that readjusted. Finally, where's it made? Well, it says right here on the side of the blade, Seki City, Japan. So that's the tour of the knife. I like it a lot. It's a kind of a basic knife, well made, and a convenient size. Let's go through a few things. So what do I like? Well, first of all, let's talk about the steel. VG10 is okay steel. It's not a modern super steel, but it was considered a super steel when it came out 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. And it's a pretty good steel. Holds an edge quite well, quite corrosion proof. I find it hard to sharpen, but it sharpens, and sharpens beautifully with some work. I like the size a lot. It's the same general dimensions as the Tenacious, but compact. And I find just a really nice size. Enough blade for small chores, and takes up less space in the hand and in the pocket. I like the carbon fiber scales. I mentioned that. They're light, they're comfortable, and I love that 3D depth appearance you get on woven carbon fiber. And once the blade tension was tuned up, I like the slow, deliberate open that locks well and is very secure. I actually like it rather a lot. It's a comfortable knife to hold. That's one of the things that Spyderco actually advertises about the knife, is that they put a lot of effort, they say, into the ergonomic design. These finger recesses here are the magic. Hold them here in your hand, that's very comfortable. Or you can choke up one notch, fingers here. Very comfortable, and just a feeling of really good control. No hot spots on the knife. Even with the clip, it's sitting nicely against the palm of my hand, and I could hold that for a long time. So like that a lot. Another thing I like about this knife, and many knives have this feature, some don't, is when I start closing the blade, I'm pushing the unlock with the heel of my thumb here, start closing the blade, so there's a live edge moving towards my hand. That scares me. On this knife, well before it gets there, the finger choil stops. So you are protected against the closing blade. You have to get out of the way and complete the closing operation. So it's a safe knife to close, and I like that. And let's talk about the blade shape. In a moment, I'm going to say I don't like the blade shape, and I don't. But right now I'm going to say I do like the blade shape. Nobody says I have to be consistent. Yeah. I just came in from doing some gardening earlier today, and so I got with this being the knife in my pocket. And the blade shape is a very useful blade shape. It pierces well, it cuts well. It's because it's so thick, there's no feeling of sturdy flimsiness. It's a good, sturdy, secure feeling blade, and I like all of that. What I don't like, we'll get to in a minute, but just that it's ugly. So, speaking of what I don't like, I mentioned one thing already. The action was not easy to adjust to the sweet spot. Pivot screw is obviously important. It's running in there, by the way, on washers. But what I discovered the hard way is the scale screws are also part of the action. There are no bushings there, so you can tighten those as much as you want. And as you tighten the scale screws, you are pressing this sandwich of metal against the lock bar. And with the scale screws tight, it becomes very difficult to operate the blade at all. Also, the clip screws interact. With the clip screw or the end scale screw tight, it pinches the lock bar so that the knife would not lock all the way. The lock bar was staying partially open, and the lock bar was not easy to press to close it. So it required a bunch of sort of back and forth with all of these screws adjusting tensions to get it just right. And I will say that to get it fairly easy to operate, that's fairly easy to operate. Not flickable, but easy to operate. All these screws actually had to be quite loose. None of them are snugged up. They're all loose enough that I felt the need to Loctite all of them. So I got them all to approximately the right place, and then each one at a time, I carefully took the screw out, Loctited it, put it back in, and then readjusted again to get the blade tension about where I want it. So it was a surprising amount of work to get it tuned to a decent action. Next thing I don't particularly like, I cannot figure out how to close this thing one-handed. And I'm going to say you can't. Now, I know I'll regret that. Somebody will send me a bloody TikTok video of closing it one-handed while juggling, but I can't figure out how to close it one-handed. The lock is down here. What do you do? Like, maybe, but now I'm in harm's way. If I have to close it one-handed, what I do is disengage the lock and then press the back of the blade against something, the table or a nearby body part, anything to get it started, and then move over and close it one-handed. So in a pinch, you can close it one-handed, but it's not an elegant thing to do. And I tend to do two-handed all the time. Next thing in my don't like list, I mentioned this with the Tenacious, and this blade has the same issue. I'm coming to call it the Spyderco oil pump problem, and that is this. The blade is closed. This steel here is inside this area, which has been lubricated because there are steel surfaces, steel on steel moving surfaces in there. So there's lubrication in there. There's oil in there. When I open the knife, that oil comes out, and now it's on this part of the blade, around here and around here. So, of course, I wipe it off. Close the blade, reopen it, a little more oil comes out. Wipe it off. So what I'm doing every time I open the knife is I'm pumping oil out of there, and eventually there isn't enough, and it starts to feel stiff. So then I have to add oil back in. So I call that the Spyderco oil pump. Now, the good news is it's not hard to keep this thing lubricated well because the clip holes provide access to that steel-on-steel surface. So what I've ended up doing is putting a drop of oil in the bottom two clip holes on each side using a micro oiler. And I'm using a heavy oil, an 85 grade nano oil, which means that it tends to stay inside there. There's very limited leaching of the oil out to the outer surface. So it hasn't made the Spyderco oil pump problem go away, but it has got to the point where if I'm carrying this knife every day, I can go about a week before it starts to feel stiff to the point where I feel like I need to relubricate it. So that's pretty good. Next, I already mentioned this, but I do find the VG10 steel hard to sharpen, which really makes me wonder how it got so dull. So anyway, so quite a bit of work to sharpen it, but it sharpened up well. And finally, is this finally? Sorry, let me scroll. Yes, finally. This design where the lanyard hole goes through a hole in the clip is kind of dumb. I mean, it means that the vast market of third-party clips aren't suitable. You got to buy a clip that was made specifically for this knife that's got the whole board in it, or you use another clip, you've covered the lanyard hole. Now, I don't plan to use a lanyard, so I don't mind having the hole covered, but it's annoying that I can't use a lanyard and it looks like a design error. You know, I say, oh, where's that hole go? Oh, it's under the clip. Somebody screwed up. Now, of course, it was me. I screwed up by putting the wrong clip on the knife, but it just seems to me to be a dumb design decision. So anyway, those are the few things that I don't like about this knife. So let's run through my internationally unknown knife rating system. Now, I usually say about Spyderco knives, this thing, I'm going to rate it on an NTGK, but this thing isn't trying to be an NTGK. Well, I'm not going to say that on this knife. This one almost is trying to be an NTGK, and I think it'll score a decent score. So let's do that. NTGK, non-threatening gentleman's knife. I'll do non-threatening first and then gentleman's knife. So for non-threatening, the good news is the slow opening. You can open it slowly with one hand, and which you should do in front of nervous people, you can open it with two hands. So that helps to make a knife non-threatening. Second is it's compact. It doesn't look like you've taken a hunting knife, Bowie knife out of your pocket. So I think in general it is a non-threatening size and mechanism. The bad on the non-threatening is I do think the Spidey leaf shape is a little bit tactical looking, a little bit scary looking. It's so wide here that the nervous person sitting next to you really can't take their eyes off all that steel. So it's a little tactical looking and a little scary. I'd give it an A. It's non-threatening, but not an A+. As a gentleman's knife, the good is the carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is classy. The lockback mechanism is traditional. Gentlemen collectible things are often traditional. The bad news is the stock clip is shallow and conspicuous, and the clip I happen to replace it with is also shallow and conspicuous. The dumb clip over the lanyard hole thing, even with a clip that actually has the proper hole in it, I don't know, I just think that looks dumb. You're trying to be gentleman appearance, and then you got this weird pipe passing through the clip, and that kind of looks like, okay, what are you trying to be? A gentleman's accessory or steampunk? So I don't care for that. I think that costs it a bit in the gentleman's knife category. And the oil pump feature, that as you open the knife, it tends to have oil around here, means that there's a buildup of oil there, which is eventually going to stain your pocket unless you're constantly wiping it off. So I would give it only a B as gentleman's knife. So all told, as an NTGK, I'm going to score it a B+ as a non-threatening gentleman's knife, which is pretty good for a Spyderco knife. Next, my KN rating. KN is for knife nerds. What will my knife nerd colleagues think of this knife? Well, of course, it's a well-known brand, and it's a long-time well-known model. And the Chief series, or Native series, has been around for a long time. And this particular version seems to have sort of some extra creds in the community. It's mentioned with reverence as being rare and well-made and so on. It's a satisfying action, not flicky, and there are some knife nerds who care a lot about flickability of a blade. So this doesn't have that, but it is a satisfying action. Now, it's satisfying in a Chris Reeve way, but it's not flickable. And good blade steel, not modern super steel, but pretty darn good. So I'm going to give it a B+ overall as a knife nerd rating. And finally, the CMR, cut myself rating. Well, after handling this knife quite a lot, including a lot of disassembly, I've never cut myself on it, so I'm going to score it an A. So that brings us to the end. And in summary, this is a nice, basic knife. I'd put in the same class as some of my slip joint knives. It's a good knife to have in the pocket for cutting things. You can open it one-handed in a pinch, but you generally don't. So it's not a knife to impress people with the mechanism, just a good quality knife to have on hand for cutting. And it's going to be a knife, another knife that I don't mind loaning to somebody. Okay action. They can figure out how to open it. I could even hand this to a complete knife newbie. They would open it like that. If I tell them the hole is there so you can open it with your thumb, they would figure that out. And anybody can close it safely. Nothing to learn. An excellent blade. And it won't break my heart if it comes back dirty or dull or even doesn't come back at all. So it's definitely a knife that goes with me under certain circumstances, and that I enjoy holding and I enjoy using. Even though it's not quite inside the category I would normally say I collect, this one, I like it quite a bit. So that's it. Thanks for following along, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.